So in our next unit, we're going to discuss 6 major characteristics of LED flexi strips and how we categorize them. Now, this may not be the way we're going to categorize them in our ABC framework. So it sets a framework for you to understand the different features of LED flexi strips. So let's get into it. The first criteria, naturally, that everybody knows is color. So LEDs could be single color LEDs, whether it's blue, whether it's red, whether it's green, or whether it's on the spectrum of white. So you have single color LEDs, and in those LEDs, you're going to have the Kelvin scale. You're going to have 3000, 4000, 5000, 6000 Kelvin. Single color LEDs could come in all shapes and varieties. The other one you want to look at is your dual color, or some people say CCT, control color. I use the terminology CCT control because you're controlling a spectrum of white light. There are models that control a spectrum of white light, and it could be either warm spectrum. So we actually have a light here that dims from 2200 Kelvin to 3000 Kelvin. The more common dual color or CCT select LEDs shift from about 3000 to 6000 Kelvin. So those give you a spectrum of white light. I would just want to make a note on that. That's particularly important. CCT LEDs are becoming popular with people who are conscious about human-centric lighting. And what human-centric lighting is, in our eyes, scientists discovered we have a third protein, not just rods and cones. We have a third protein that's responsible not for vision, but for detection of blue light. And what that blue light does, it affects our hormone levels. It affects our sleep-wake cycle, most importantly. Now, you would know that people use blue light filters because LEDs have a lot of blue light, and those are hampering sleep-wake cycles. So what human-centric lighting does, it shifts the LEDs throughout the day, the artificial light, and keeps it in sync with the sunlight Kelvin throughout the day. So for example, in the early morning, your light might start off very warm. As the day progresses, it's going to shift to 4000, 5000, 6000. And all the way when it comes back to sunset, it's going to get back to that warm color. That keeps your body in sync to promote better sleep-wake cycles. The other color options we have is RGB. I don't have any RGB here at the moment, but I do have RGBW. You have RGBW with a warm white chip, 3000 Kelvin chip. Naturally, you have your blue, your red, your green single color LEDs. But that takes care of color. The second characteristic we want to look at is brightness. So you can have different wattages of the same model light that gives you bright, medium brightness, and really bright outputs. The other category you want to look at is control. So all LEDs have some sort of control. There are LEDs that have no control, which means it cannot dim. All it could do is switch on and off. So all LEDs by default can switch on and off with a relay that has nothing to do with the LED. The second thing is most LEDs could dim. I have encountered LEDs that cannot dim, and that's because of the circuit design. So LEDs could dim, and the most common way LEDs dim is through a technique called pulse width modulation. We will dig into dimming techniques later on in this course, but right now, pulse width modulation and DC dimming by lowering the DC output of the light are the most common ways to dim LEDs. The best way, I just have to let you know, between the both options is pulse width modulation because you don't get that flickering. With DC dimming, by lowering the voltage, you're going to see a flicker, and we'll talk about that more later in the course. The other type of controls deals with RGBW lights or RGB lights. You could use pulse width modulation to control the red, the blue, the green, and the white output. You could even mix them. So red and blue will create purple, green and red will create yellow, blue and green will create cyan, and red, green, and blue will produce a form of white light. It's not going to be the cleanest form because the LEDs are all contributing to form white light. Some of the wavelengths of light may outweigh the others, so you might get a tinge blue light, a tinge green, a tinge white. If you have a really good chip, you get good color mixing. But to solve this problem, the RGBW chip has an additional and isolated white chip, so you get a pure white light. The other type of control we have with RGBW are the SPI and DMX. So DMX has its own protocol to control the LED, and SPI has its own protocol to control the LED. Another feature of LEDs that makes them different from one another are the optics. And we spoke about optics very early in the course. optics play a big role in LED lighting. So the natural optics we spoke about was the 180 degrees from the COB chip. The LED chips that we spoke about earlier has a 120 degree beam angle. So all of these have a 120 degree beam angle. Now, specialized chips, this one gives a wide beam and it's a wide projection. So it's not 120, but it's 160. It's not 180 where you're losing light. You have light loss to the sides, but you have a projection of 160 degrees, which is excellent for light boxes. You also have a tight optic beam. So if you want to wash or project the light very far out, this LED has a 30 degree beam angle. So that's another differentiating characteristic. The other one we're going to talk about is printed circuit board design. Typical LED strips bend up and down like this, but there are special LED strips that could flex around like this. So all of these strips you're seeing here, they bend up and down. Even this one, which the emitting diode is outwards, it bends up and down like this, but this one could bend and form a full circle like that. The last characteristic I'm going to talk about, and I mentioned it earlier in control with DMX and SPI, are LED strips with integrated circuits. So people call them ICs. LED strips with ICs can do two things. One, they could control the signal of your LED to give you RGBW mixing at the segment, whether it's an SPI protocol or a DMX protocol. And there are also ICs that keep the current consistent throughout the circuit. So what that means is that you can have LEDs spread across long distances without any voltage drop. So instead of connecting the typical 5 meters you would see in the market space, as far up to 30 meters, even 40 meters, even 50 meters with 48 volts. The DMX chip has two types of chips. There's a high performance chip that's used in nightclubs for fast transmission of data and a wide color spectrum. And then there's a slow data transmission chip, which really does all color changing and not the segmental changing. The SPI chip, there are like 24 chip prototypes in the market, like TM1948 and WS2813. We could dig into that into a separate module, but SPI lights carry data across these ICs, so the segments have individual control. You might be more familiar with the SPI lights if you know brands like Govee that you could buy on Amazon. They utilize do-it-yourself SPI kits. They're not as reliable as DMX ICs, but it gives people a chance to level up their home with a small little do-it-yourself kit. The moment you're going to want to expand these kits, you're going to need extra accessories like amplifiers and all these things. So do-it-yourself kits are fun for home projects, but for real installations, you need the components to build a solid, reliable system. So just to recap our LEDs and the classification of them, we typically use single color LEDs in any sort of cabinetry detail, accent lighting, ceiling lighting where there's a special effect in a cove or any sort of details at that human level. Then the extended LEDs, we use them for long distance installations. So if you're doing long ceiling effects, if you're doing cove lights in a ceiling, and you need more than the required 5 meters, these are an excellent choice. The CCT LEDs or the dual strip LEDs, those could be used for cabinetry, for ceilings, for any application as a single color, but you want that human-centric approach. RGBW could be used in any space if people like color in their space. We particularly use them a lot in the entertainment industries on those type of projects because people want that color flexibility. The DMX and the SPIs, again, we use them a lot in the entertainment industry, in fixtures, naked. We use them to create that wow lighting animation effect. These type of wide angle LEDs, we typically use these in sign boxes or signage boxes. This side view LEDs, a lot of signage companies use them to get different shapes on signage that they're creating. This light that bends on the axis, we call it the Z line because it looks like a Z, but you can use these on mirrors so you get that nice backlit shape on any shape of mirror or any types of backlit signage. These are excellent. These optic control LEDs, the wall washers, we use them on architectural facades where an LED strip is just going to give a short glow. If we use these flex washers, we're going to create longer spreads of light because of the lens. I hope you enjoyed this unit as you understand the different characteristics that allow LEDs to be limitless in design application.